Karzalean Key. All rights reserved by Seth Gill. Read by Seth Gill. Chapter 1. Briar's Grade. Angelina closed her eyes and tilted her head back. For a moment, 16-year-old had calm breath and relaxed mind. But her anxiety returned a second later, and she stood again, pacing along the side of the room anew. The three wizards, 3 tables down in their heavy green robes, glanced up a moment before shaking their heads, mumbling to one another and refocusing on their own studies. The room was quite large, with tall bookshelf running its length on both sides. Both ends led out to various halls and pretty much endless corridors. Angelina eyed the one set of stairs and connecting corridor in particular. That corridor led ultimately to the first tower's spell circle and her much anticipated test. It had been near on a year since Angelina had crawled into the first tower through the ductwork and dropped down into the same room trying to find the Council of Five's secrets. Of course, the Council of Five was no more. They'd all perished with the Council of Mages when the dark domain they'd been playing with had turned on them. Angelina was trying to ignore the fact that she, Gordon, and Simon had pretty much turned the dark domain violent on them. She'd never deny it. She just tried to ignore their slight misjudgment in the use of magic. They'd actually been trying to do something different at the time. In the years since Starben, Scripter, and their equally old wizard friends had returned from helping stop the spell the councils had been trying to exact in that dark domain, in that time, they'd exacted a lot of changes. Wizards were now allowed into the first tower to study. That hadn't been allowed for at least a generation. The bookshelves that were those walls had once been only half full. They were now near overflowing with magical texts, both new and old, and the ladders that rolled down the length of one end of the room to the other had been repaired. There was even proper lighting in the room by way of 3 crystal chandeliers along the raised ceiling. They were lit by magic, of course. The room was even cleaner now than it had been before. The duct grate she'd gotten in through remained the same, but the room was guarded by better magics. Angelina doubted she'd be able to sneak in again undiscovered. The building had been cleaned in general, from those steps on either end of the room to the corridors, torch sconces, and walls. There wasn't a web to be found anywhere. They'd even added windows when they'd returned, so most rooms on the upper levels were lit by the sun. The place was becoming less medieval by the moment. There were long moments, but Angelina was seeing improvements. Seeing as how she'd grown up in a lot more modern of a world, Angelina was glad to see some more modern touches worming their way into the place. The spell circle was open at different times for magic testing and training. Testing. Just thinking about the spell circle had her turning back around, moving her hair from her eyes, and taking a slow breath. It didn't help keep her calm any, so she sighed, grimaced, and started back for the table where she started, where Gordon still sat, staring at her with a patronizing grin. How can you be so calm? She grumbled too loudly. The three wizards glared irritably across this time, and 4 mages walking through shared frowns. Angelina frowned back and lowered her voice. Silence in any library was still expected. Nothing had changed in that respect with the passing of the councils. I don't know how you can just sit there with your feet up, she grumbled more quietly, slumping back down into her chair. You're part of this test too, you know. Aren't you at least a bit curious what it'll be like? How hard it'll be? She crossed her arms. What it'll be? She added with a sharp inhale and sour sneer. They could at least have told us that much already. Gordon did nod at that. That can't be it, Angelina goaded. Come on, give me something. Gordon shrugged. I'm just tagging along, the 12-year-old countered. No one's going to make me a briar grade anything. He sighed long, then shrugged more easily. You get that fun for yourself. Angelina hated how easily he was taking things. She also hated that he was right. He did seem to have gotten the more comfortable role and clothing. His leather jacket was cleaner. The 12-year-old's canvas pants obviously weren't bothering him. Angelina found her pants chafing at the knees a little. She'd only just convinced them to work cotton to a point of denim, too. She missed that pair of jeans, even if they didn't fit her perfectly. She wished she knew why they'd insisted on a wool liner for a jacket. The hood was a nice touch, she mused. They hadn't explained the liner any more than the need for gloves and a scarf. They fit well into the inner pocket, but why not explain them? Again, why not tell them what this test would entail? It just wasn't fair. Danch was briar grade, Angelina noted with an anxious swallow. They let him take his own apprentice. Gordon took his legs from the second chair and sat, staring quizzically across. He was a briar grade for 10 years, Angelina, he groaned. You're not getting an apprentice tomorrow, no matter what happens here today. She frowned, crossing her arms anew. Gordon allotted a sympathetic sigh. But you will eventually, should you pass, he conceded. Which I'm sure you will, he quickly added. Angelina's frown was doubtful one second, then anxiously hopeful the next. You will come out a Briargrade wizard, Gordon continued with a mock bow. And as Starban's apprentice at Briargrade, you'll gain access to more arcane magics most of the rest of us have only ever heard about. Angelina lauded a quick smirk. You will share, right? Gordon checked, leaning in and lowering his voice. A few tidbits? Angelina almost promised she would then and there, but she paused. She'd instantly lose her Briargrade sharing specialized magic with Gordon, if she even passed and earned it. She tried a few responses before cringing. You're pretty close to getting Briar, she tried. Gordon rolled his eyes and sat back. What? She asked. What was she missing? Scripter seems to like you. You've been his apprentice as long as I've been Starben's. I'm not old enough, Gordon grumbled, averting his gaze. There's an age limit involved. Oh, I didn't know. Gordon shrugged. I know you can't share, he grumbled, waving off her next words. I guess I just had to try. I wouldn't want them punishing you. You've worked hard for this. You deserve it. Angelina smiled and nodded. And you'll get there too, she insisted. Gordon's frown suggested he wasn't convinced. You're the best mage there is around here, Gordon, Angelina insisted. And you've impressed Scripter, which is I've yet to do, not being tested for Briar. What does that tell you? Gordon smiled smugly at that. Angelina found her sympathy fading all of a sudden. Still, Gordon deserved his praise, even if he took it a little all too well. I'm glad they're letting you along, she mumbled. I was worried I'd have to do this alone. I'm just glad they're letting me test my new spell. I'm surprised they're allowing us to use talismans in the first place, Angelina interjected. Gordon tapped his right hand on the tabletop, the bottom side of the ring tapping. He eyeballed the two medallions on chains sitting to one side. Angelina touched her staff where it leaned against the next chair with its bulbous, hand-like top knob. They still don't like letting us use them in everyday chores and the like, Angelina mused with a shrug. Why are they letting us use them in a test? Does that mean the test is going to be that much harder? They're probably going to have some new spell that makes them useless once we're inside, or alters their magic somehow. Gordon chuckled lightly. You're imagining things. Angelina wavered on a counter. Maybe, she lauded. Maybe not. It had been the last council that had enforced the use of talismans, staffs, medallions, rings, or wands charged with magic. They'd controlled whose talisman could do what and how well. Starband, Scripter, and the current council had been opposed. She'd figured they'd have removed all talismans from use when they'd taken over, but magickers, mage, and wizard alike were too dependent on their use. Instead, the talismans remained, but they only held any spell for a few days, depending on the amount of use. The staff or wand simply ran out of magical charge and needed reweaving, and any talisman could only hold up to 3 spells at once. It was at times unimportant, at other times, the limit was quite annoying. In other words, people could still use their talismans, but they needed to actually know the old true magic Starban and his like supported to charge them. And with only 3 held spells at a time, a magicer would be using the true magic ongoing throughout. It was a mix of both old and new world magic. Angelina knew Starban was still detested the use of staff or ring for a magical aid, but he'd stopped his natural distaste at a low growl or quick clear throat. True change never came easily. Angelina knew true magic well enough. She accepted the compromise, as had Gordon and Simon in turn. Most every other magicer was still struggling at learning what the 3 youth had come north learning, what they'd since become quite proficient at using. Anyway, to this point, knowing how much Starban disliked the use of talismans, she wished she knew if them allowing her to use the staff during this test was necessarily good or not. It might be that the others helping judge this test were forcing his agreement in their use, or it was a trick. She figured it was the latter. She just hadn't figured out what specific catch they'd throw at them. What are you taking anyway? Gordon asked. What? Gordon frowned. Your staff, he groaned. What magic? Angelina nodded. Fire, light, and freeze, she mumbled. She shrugged defensively. I figured they're the general necessities, no matter what this entails, though I wish I could have added mute or a cloak of some sort. If my new spell works, Gordon suggested with a smirk, you might be able to soon enough. Let's hope it does. Why can't you test it out in normal conditions? Amount and type of use is the only real test, Gordon insisted. He adjusted his hood, centering it behind his neck before sitting back again. I've already tested it out in normal uses against whatever wards they've thrown up, he mused, but the talismans have held 4, sometimes 5 spells in the same bit of wood or metal. A wary shrug. But I can't tell why the number of spells isn't constant. And will the spells hold under a more strenuous task? Your test is likely going to involve the right amount of everything I need to get my answers. He glanced around and bobbed his head a few times. It's been kind of boring around here since we got back, he conceded with a blush. This will be fun. Whatever they throw at us. Angelina had to smile. She blushed as well. It had been boring since they returned north. They'd helped destroy a dark domain that they'd accidentally morphed into a dark hole that had threatened to consume and destroy the world. Somehow, nothing since had measured up. She was glad it wasn't just her finding life a little more dull. "What are you taking?" she asked. Gordon motioned from his ring to the medallions. A spell book, he listed, some protective spells, and a deep cloak. "I figured you'd bring more offensive spells, so I focus on the more defensive magics, to cover all bases. It's a good thing we know each other so well." "Yeah, it helps." He adjusted the neck of his dark blue shirt. "Why turtlenecks?" Angelina smiled sarcastically. "They never did explain that one like so much else," she joked with a quick shake of her head. "I actually like them, mind you. I just don't know why." Gordon's expression suggested she was crazy for liking turtlenecks. Angelina just shrugged it off. They were warm and had sleeves that rolled up. She found comfort in both. She wasn't really sure why. Angelina actually owned a few of them, and it was the one mystery requirement for this test that she hadn't been obsessing over. Until now. "There you two are." Angelina and Gordon turned to glance towards that all too familiar voice. "Thought you'd be outside in the town," Simon noted with a smirk. The 19-year-old yawned, stretched, and then leaned against the back of the table's head chair. "There's a fire eater and acrobatics going on," he mused. "Some kind of county fair." "It's similar to the lunar festival they have here," Gordon explained. "There's a whole animal show and judging coming up in an hour." Simon and Angelina both stared at Gordon. Angelina was wondering why Gordon would care to know such details. Their homesteads had both been built on farms, but neither she nor Garden farmed or had livestock. His parents didn't farm. Her parents didn't even garden. Simon seemed equally confused. Gordon glanced awkwardly from one person to the other. "So you're back," he added with a perky smile. "A change of topic? Been here long?" Angelina was tempted to let Gordon suffer longer just for the fun of it, but the 12-year-old was blushing so bad that his head might pop, and she wanted to know what was happening in the wider world, too. "Yeah," she prompted. "Sit, distract me some, and let us all know what it's like outside." Simon shrugged and sat. He also yawned and stretched a little more. His traveling jacket was almost Western with its wind-swept appearance and general style, but the pack he dropped to one side was a green canvas with cracked pleather. It was filled to the brim with a blanket, map, and some discolored plastic containers. Angelina couldn't make out more than a lot of bulges otherwise. Simon's hair was short, and it looked like he'd been trying to grow a beard. Trying was the way she'd put it. The button shirt and pants were as old as the coat and pack. The whole getup was out of place. It was a mismatched combination Simon had clearly found here and there in his travels with his mother. Angelina subconsciously moved her long brown hair behind her ears and whispered a silent spell. She could feel her hair weaving itself into a tight braid weave. Satisfied it was at least clean and out of the way, she focused solely on Simon once more. "Where have you been?" she asked. "All you said when you left last was that your mother wanted to visit Europe." Angelina shrugged. "I don't even know where that is, and why haven't you changed out of that coat by now? It looks like it could stand up on its own." Simon seemed taken aback by her question. Gordon was about to interrupt and tell her what Europe was like and where it was, but she waved his answer off. No doubt he knew exactly where it was, where it had been before the world had fallen apart at least. Gordon seemed to know everything trivia related. "I want to hear it firsthand," she suggested, "for someone who's been there and seen it all. All we've ever known was Iroquois Falls." Gordon nodded and sat back with his arms crossed. They both glanced at Simon. "Please," Angelina pressed. "Give us something one of his books and a viewing mirror up here can't supply." Simon smiled and rapped out a quick beat on the tabletop. There were shushes from the far table they all ignored. "To be honest," he started, "I'm not sure we got there." Angelina frowned and Gordon squinted, clearly confused. "My mother says it was Europe, and the map agreed," Simon conceded. "I'm not saying it wasn't the place, it's just it was all brown. I mean, there were trees and a few of what she called vineyards, but there were also huge tracts of land turned brown that nothing will grow on, even after all these decades." Simon shook his head in dismay and lounged back in his chair. "When the Algernay attacked us all those years ago," he rued, "they attacked worldwide. I'd hoped to find all the things she spoke of, but we found worse devastation than what we had at Iroquois Falls in places. They're more organized," he allotted, with a nod and quick wince. "They're a little more forgiving of wizards, but not really. They enlist their help, but wizards are more slaves than helpers. We were almost found out a few times." "What about the gardens and stones she was talking about?" Gordon probed. "We found a few of them," a quick rub of his brow. "A lot of buildings there were fallen. They rebuilt new monuments and tried to find their past again." Simon sat up, leaning on his elbows. "We ended up in Rome at one point, and they've rebuilt colosseums and bathhouses and whole aqueducts. They've even got some of the aqueducts working again and resettled the old cities in some places." He shrugged. "The one fountain she was looking for was actually still there in that case, and it was nice." "Pure magic?" Angelina checked. She leaned on her elbows too, as did Gordon. "An old source from Merlin's days," Simon confirmed with a grin. "It had remained hidden all those years, long after its kind died out and became legend. It wasn't found out when the comet passed over and Elgar and I moved in, nor after. He smiled broader. Our magics were doubled just being near it. Angelina smiled too. She wished she'd accepted his mother's invitation to travel with them, but the chance to be an apprentice with Starben had been more compelling. She didn't regret her choice. She just wished she could have had both. So you've been testing with age-old magics, she grumbled enviously. Simon was quick to shake his head. No, I've been training with them. Angelina didn't see the difference. Simon rolled his eyes. She's been drilling me the whole time, training me in spells I'd never known existed. That's tough, Angelina teased. Gordon frowned. Such a dismal thing. Simon's face and hands showed recent bathing. He smelled fine. He had been back a while blending in with their little wizard community, but he still wore his travel garb and carried around his pack like he just walked in from the long road. Angelina figured he was showing off and missing the experience. Yeah, he was so hard done by. Simon held up his hands to stop their teasing banter. He then rubbed his brow and the bridge of his nose. I loved some of the sights, he lauded dryly, and being in Rome was amazing. There were castles that hadn't fallen that we got to explore, he started, then stopped to shake his head. Some moments of traveling with my mother have been wondrous, and I won't take them back for anything. Angelina and Gordon sat back with smirks. Angelina allowed Simon some time to continue on his own, but he just kept shaking his head and patting his lips like the words would drop out if he played with them long enough. But what, she finally prompted when she could wait no more. He glanced around as if to make sure his mother wasn't listening. I'm glad we found her, he mumbled defensively, but imagine the walk we had north from Iroquois Falls. He paused to make eye contact. Angelina furrowed her brow, like she'd never forget those 3 weeks marching north over rocky terrain. Imagine that, Simon insisted. Only add another month, and make it only with one person whose jokes get old really fast. Angelina imagined redoing the hike north with only Simon. She started to get his point. I love her, Simon grumbled quietly on. And again, I'm glad I found her again, but she keeps making sure I'm fine. She keeps wanting to know what I'm thinking, and when, and why. His eyes near bugged out. Add to that the unending drills in magic you quickly learn to wish you'd never learned, because you get so much of it. It's like she was trying to make up for 12 years of absence all in one trip. It's enough to drive a man mad. What man would that be? Angelina joked. Simon glared back. She couldn't help but smile. She loves you, Angelina mused. In time, she'll change. She'll ease up. My parents fawned over me until I blew up a few times, and they finally got the message to give me space. Her smile faded for a rather despondent frown. A quick inhale. She wasn't ready to have that conversation. Anyway, she spoke on, eager to change the subject. She'll come around, Simon. Just give her time. Yeah, right, Simon groaned. He shrugged, lounging back again. And as for testing, I still get that here. Angelina and Gordon shared bewildered expressions. Oh, yeah, Simon mocked. I had a day back here to sleep before she had me in for testing for all that drilling she and I did on our travels. That's where I've been all this time, not getting out, not relaxing. He rolled his eyes and shook his head. I somehow figured traveling with my mother and exploring the world would have been a lot more different than it's turned out to be. He smirked sourly and briskly shook his head. She's talking about heading out again in a month, and she's expecting me to tag along. He closed his eyes. I don't want to go, but I don't know how to say no. Angelina had no wisdom to share. Maybe we should head out, she suggested, glancing from one friend to the other. Just the three of us. Simon's stare was amused. Gordon showed no reaction whatsoever. I'm serious, Angelina insisted. She had been hoping for instant support. We've got enough magic to explore your Europe or anywhere else, though I don't want all that walking, she grumbled. We'll use the Kanchok since they finally cleaned it up. Simon shrugged uncommittedly. Gordon frowned. After this test, Angelina suggested, I'll ask for some time off. I don't think Starben will mind, and part of your apprenticeship with Scripter allows you time for experimentation and private studies, she lauded for Gordon. We could study your talismans further, not only in town and this test, but also in the real world out there. Gordon conceded a short nod. Oh yeah, I'm testing for Briar today, Angelina added for Simon. She shared a tense smile. They've been making me wait an hour already. Gordon shook his head. We showed up an hour early on her insistence, he corrected. Whatever, Angelina irritably countered. Gordon's more relaxed smirk was back. She rolled her eyes and shook her head. Now that the talk had come back to the test, she was back in her more anxious state and needed more distraction. Or more support. Have you the time to watch? She asked Simon. Maybe knowing I'm not just surrounded by wizards that are judging my every mistake will help. Simon hummed and hawed a few times before rapping the table some more. His eyes were seemingly glued to his toes. Angelina stared at him a long moment before crossing her arms tighter and glaring across instead. What? She nearly growled. He glanced up, then shrugged it off. She saw guilt in that quickly averted gaze. Tell me, she urged. Just get it over with. Simon seemed to be bracing himself for the reply. I'm part of the test. What? Angelina Gordon spat in unison. Simon sat back with his hands up as if fending off their next words. One of the exams they have me doing, he explained, involves helping administer your test today. He couldn't meet her gaze for a moment before staring back. He was clearly tired of playing extra nice. He wouldn't have you take the test if you couldn't pass, he reasoned. So why are you worried? Angelina swallowed her shock. She tried a few answers that didn't seem to fit. What part would he and his newly learned age-old magics play? She didn't bother asking him. He would have been told not to share that tidbit anyway. I really want to pass, she replied with a tense sneer. I want to know about things I can't learn unless I pass. You know, like dragons and blue fire. She glanced from Simon to Gordon, then back. I came north to learn magic. I want to know it all. I've worked so hard to get this far, and I'm even being tested. This last year hasn't been easy. You talked about drilling. Starband's a whole lot harder on its apprentices than he ever was with us as a group. She slowly exhaled, then pursed her lips. I'm worried I'll fail. Is that so unusual? Simon smiled. Not for one of us. What? Angelina grumbled. You're a natural learner, Simon groaned. You're just driving yourself too hard. There are 10 more years after this before you reach the next level of wizarding. You know that, right? She nodded mockingly. You're going to be fine, Simon mumbled. Just don't worry yourself too much. And don't overthink things like you tend to do. Angelina sat back with an indignant air. I don't know what you're talking about. Simon and Gordon's smirks were telling. At least she hasn't forgotten to ask for help this time, Gordon mused. Simon nodding. Angelina stared them both down. I can still ask other friends. I do know more than two people. No, you don't, Simon countered. Not well, Gordon agreed, rather sarcastically. Angelina hated them sometimes. In her mind, she came up with at least 4 new friends she'd made, but 2 of them were boyfriends she didn't talk to anymore, and the other 2 were kind of strange, so she didn't talk to them much. She closed her eyes. So she still needed to learn how to make new friends. Was that their point? You're going to be fine, Simon urged anew. He picked up his pack and looped it over his shoulder. I'll see you inside. He left before Angelina could say more. She just watched him leave with growing irritation. He's right, Gordon suggested. You'll be fine. We'll do fine. Angelina sighed. I know, I guess. Maybe I want to be worried? Gordon screwed up his face. I want this so badly, Angelina mumbled, and I know it's all that, but I was thinking last night that maybe I also need this to be hard to take away from the tedium of things. Gordon rubbed his eyes. So you make every test a stress attack? Maybe. Someone told me that once. Maybe. Gordon frowned, shrugged, and then shook his head. Yeah, Angelina grumbled. I didn't put much stock in it either. She glanced anxiously around the room. Maybe I do overthink things. I suppose it's possible.